So good evening, everyone. Today we are going to present about social change within the context of health communication. Our group consists of 6 members, and that is me, Abel Jethro, Athar Raihan, Elliana Azzahra, Jasmine Nazilla, Meyndi Christy, and Mohammad Ihsan. So the agenda of this particular presentation, we are going to discuss two kinds of paper. And the first paper is called the Young People Usage on Wearable Healthy Lifestyle Technologies. And second paper called the Commercialization of Discipline, Keep Fit Culture and Its Values.
Okay, so for the first journal is Young People's Uses of Wearable Healthy Lifestyle Technologies, Surveillance, Self-Surveillance, and Resistance. It is made by Victoria A. Goodyear, Charlotte Kerner, and Michael Quinner. Next slide, please. So nowadays, there are many digital technologies in terms of health. There is now an application which provides self-tracking, measurement, and quantifications about one's health. There are many positives and negatives from using application, which are the first one, it can increase the motivation of young people about health. So by seeking knowledge about health and what it's used for our bodies and their future, especially women, they have a high spirit to take care of themselves to be healthier and fitter. The second one is new insights about health. So with the help of application, it can explain numerous new things about health and will provide more complete information about the health of our bodies and what we can do about ourselves. Lastly, it can cause internal pressure and guilt. So on the negative side, health application can cause internal pressure and guilt on oneself. Why? Because it can lead to self-insecurity about themselves and make them think more about diet and constant comparison with other people's bodies. However, that's where the target of health application comes from and motivates people to be healthier again. Next slide, please. And then there's surveillance. The very definition about surveillance is how people were being watched or who felt they were being watched, regulated by their actions towards something. The practice of surveillance also entails and promotes self-surveillance, which involves certain truth about how health and healthy behavior is privileged. For example, 100 steps per day is healthy behavior. So self-surveillance, resistance, and power relations are one of the orders to make sense of how young people act in relation to wearable health device and health application. An acceptance of norms of health and the regulations of the self in terms of self-surveillance and in relation to self-tracking. Technologies like Fitbit calls for constant monitoring of young people's daily health practices. Through the device and application, young people potentially become subjects of both the normalizing gaze of health as well as their own self-surveillance of who to become. In conclusion, users are actively engaged in surveillance themselves as watchers, but they also participate voluntarily and consciously in the role of watched. This way, surveillance is not only analyzed in the data as disciplinary and reproductive, where the students are exposed to the gaze, but also potentially involve pleasurable, empowering, and participatory aspects of the practice. Next slide, please. Now, there are 6 methods that this journal use for the research about health communication. The first one is context and participants, which is a case study that was designed to provide a grounded, holistic, and detailed account on young people's use of the Fitbit device and application. The second one is ethics, which is a procedure that brief and debriefing lessons that the researchers used to minimize risk and harm during the research. So in the reporting of the finding, anonymity has been addressed through referring to the young people in a numerical format. So for example, student 1, student 2, and etc. The third one is Fitbit, which is an application where it has a main feature that records, monitors, and measures the number of steps traveled during a day, where, for example, a standardized target of 10,000 steps and calculations of calorie consumption is provided. Also, this app allows the individual to monitor their data in graphs, adapt their physical activity goals, compete with friends, earn badges for physical activity progress, record exercise, track sleep patterns, and log food intake. The next methods will be explained by my colleague, Meyndi.
Okay, thank you, Jasmine. So on this part, we have data generation. So these researchers generated their data through a group interview in the fall of an 8-week period process. They were selected to create a supportive environment that encourages the expression of personal and although multiple conflicting viewpoints. So they had 8 focus group interviews, which they conducted in schools. And they ranged from 4 to 6 participants and meeting an acceptable quantity of interviews, and it is also voluntary. Now, they were also formulated based on the inclusion of participants from a range of ability groups in their physical education classes, varied friendship groups, and a range of socioeconomic backgrounds. And then the next, we have their data analysis. Now, this data analysis emphasized the concept of surveillance, self-surveillance, and resistance from Foucault. And they evaluated in a series of steps. And such steps were where all transcripts were read by the authors in order to identify important segments, and then evaluated on analytical questions derived from the concepts itself, and then it was decided upon and used. It was in this case that the process was to ensure that the ensured research questions remain on a central focus while also remaining open and reasonable to emerging understandings. And then the last, we have deliberative strategy. Now, in deliberative strategy, it was an end goal for their qualitative research. The researchers note that that this strategy involved intelligent deliberation and balanced consideration of alternatives through mutual communication. The researchers put it as a goal that in this forum, they had a collective agreement where all the co-authors were given a possibility to make such judgments in relation to different alternatives, views, and arguments in order for them to gain a conclusive end for their research. On to the next slide, please. It will be discussed by my colleague.
Okay, moving on to the results of this paper. It results to two outcomes. The first one is surveillance and self-surveillance, which it also results into 2 outcomes, which is the first one is reaching 10,000 steps makes you fit and healthy. The young people were quite clear about the self-surveillance appearing as a consequence of the health surveillance gaze of the Fitbit. They, in some senses, willingly participate in the surveillance. And then for the second one, peer surveillance makes you want to do more or not. Using the device and the application was about accepting the surveillance and the gaze of others, and accepting the norm that you should want to compare and should want to win over your peers. Next slide, please. This is the other result from this paper is resistance. So in resistance, it also came into results, which is the first one is measuring is not accurate and it can make you feel bad or bored about yourself. which result, the young people did not trust the accuracy of the device, yet they trust the norm of 10,000 steps equaling health. The data was not essential or interesting. The data from the Fitbit made them feel bad about themselves. The device did not record physical activity as the part of their lives. And then the second one is measuring step has no educational value. They resist how power was exercised on the teacher by using steps as a norm for educational content. They also resist a one-size-fits-all norm regarding health and education, and a strong part of that resistance relates to the educational message offered that equates to health being measured and valued in terms of steps. Moving on to the next paper, please.
So onto the second paper. It's called The Commercialization of Discipline, Keep Fit Culture and Its Values by Roberta Sassotel. So the first part of this paper is called Gym for Fitness. So fitness was politically instilled to the people back in early 1900, as many institutions such as school, government, barracks, factories, and prison encouraged the people to have a healthy body and lifestyle. And one of them is by going to the gym. But since the end of the Second World War, there are changes to the societal norms regarding to the physical fitness of a person. As finally, today's gyms relate to particular ideal body. To have a physical fit body nowadays is a choice for the people, as it is now for a personalized choice for all of them, as they appeal to a wide range of individual requirements, as well as the sheer variety of exercise techniques accessible does not rule out the existence of a common denominator. As we'll see later, the fitness ideal is both well-defined and yet amorphous at the same time. On to the next slide.
Okay, so how is a fit body defined? So the idea of fitness is therefore an umbrella term for the set of deep physical characteristics like energy, elasticity, and strength, which define a fit body, and also a series of exercise techniques aimed at obtaining a body with these characteristics. A fit body, thus, can be defined as a body full of energy and malleable energy source to use in everyday life. However, this energy emanates from the body shape. Not only is energy an instrument of the subject in the world, an energetic look is also a crucial indicator of the subject in the world. On to the next slide.
As it is stated by my colleague Ihsan, a fit body would require you to have a looks that is emitting such an energy that shows that you're fit. So this is what we call as natural plasticity in some sense of health communication, and basically what gym can provide in many sense of perceive in this particular paper. Let's move on to the next one. So the legitimization of a gym is that it provides us as a program that provides us with a program that aims for the ideals of physics, capacity, and plasticity. So the idea in which a body can be shaped in a certain way and to many extents as well is what we call as a plasticity, or the plasticity factors of a certain body. And it differs from one individual to the others, since the background of it and also the process of the how such an individual shapes their own body really depends on the individual itself. So it differs from one person to another. Let's move on to the next slide. But how shall shaping a body be perceived in the society? So within the paper, of which are an Italian paper, so it perceived in two different ways. The first one, we have the natural one, and then we have the unnatural one. So the rigor of this research do come at a certain limitations, of which are they only put a sample of a gym members. So in some sense that they are fairly lenient towards natural shape of a body. So natural means that it is a non-magical way methods, or like somewhat of a work for themselves method, as it is perceived by the members of the gym itself, to naturally plasticize themselves based on their own individual capacity. So in some sense, gym and training programs were seen as the best pathway to achieve ideal or natural plasticity that is perceived by the society. But also we have what we call as the unnatural methods of plasticity. It is considered by many of the respondents within the paper itself as an invasive and out of capacity. So as it is mentioned previously by Ihsan itself, it requires you to have a fit body that also possesses an energy of it being strong in some sense, and achieving it through an invasive method such as plastic surgery does not fulfill that particular matter as it is perceived by the respondents behind the paper itself. So that is what we call as unnatural invasive plasticity by perceived by the paper. Let's move on to the next one. So the argument that aligns with the cultural grounds that we are going to talk about here, as it is that we are here to talk about how health communication is perceived not in a dominant paradigm, more into how it is culturally perceived. The first one will be delivered by the thesis of Elliana.
Okay, thank you, Athar. So basically from the first paper, there are 2 points of cultural notion in this paper. Specifically, well, first, thesis, by which technology fits well and best with the lives of young people because of the fact that culturally young people appreciate personalization of health. However, there also exists the antithesis to that, of which are pressure and negative feelings towards themselves and the unfortunate products of health technologies in the cultural perspective. You can continue, Athar.
All right, thank you very much, Elliana, for that brief explanation. So the second one will be how culture is actually perceived in the second paper. So we can see directly to how culture actually delivers how a body or how a physics can be shaped from time to time. So it is directly tied to a cultural value when it is perceived by the community or perceived by a certain group of people. We can see that a fit body actually are subject to many cultural values, and it changes and it develops over time. We know, such as those within this particular paper, they idolize what we call as Anna Falchi, or one of the models in Italy. Fine physique would require what we call as an agenda creation of ideals in some sense, and shapes, looks, and energy are shapes through that particular sense as well. So we can see that even from the level of health requires you to have some cultural perception of how can we see a healthy body. So that is what we call as the conclusive, as a concluding argument to what we call as a fit body, and also how we perceive technology in many sense, what we call as a healthy lifestyle. So that is it from today.